Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Leonila. Leonila jerked and looked at her husband. Why are you shouting like that? How can I not shout when you haven't responded for the last 10 minutes? Leonila tiredly rubbed her forehead. What? Leonila, I can't take it anymore. I can't, do you understand? Silvio paced around the room and Leonila looked at him in bewilderment. I don't understand. What are you talking about? She understood everything perfectly. She understood that Silvio wanted a quiet and peaceful life and that he was tired of seeing her constant tears and the abnormal blame in her eyes. But not now. You understand everything. He squatted down in front of her. Leonila, I suffer just as much as you do, but I work. I'm trying to live somehow, and you? You've turned into a shadow. You don't look anything like a human being. Do I have to look like a human being? What do you think? What do people look like when they lose their children? Bad, Leonila, very bad, but not like you. People lose children, but they try to keep living. Leonila stood up abruptly and walked to the window. So you've decided that you want to keep on living? You've decided it's time to forget about our little girl? Do you know who you are after this? Silvio stood up wearily. You know, Leonila, I don't care anymore what you think of me. You know perfectly well that the search is still ongoing. In 6 years, a 5-year-old girl has turned into a teenager. I understand everything, but you also need to understand that you can't go on like this. Then don't go on like this, Leonila glared at him angrily. Don't go on like this. You couldn't care less about our daughter. You couldn't care less that they still couldn't find her. You couldn't care less that when we're not at home, someone might call and tell us where she is. Silvio saw that she was about to turn hysterical. He was clearly used to it by now and understood that the less attention he paid to it, the faster it would end. Silvio walked into the room and picked up the packed suitcase. He walked past Leonila, and she suddenly fell silent. Where are you going? Leonila, I'm leaving. I can't take it anymore. I can't bear to look at you either. But what about me? What about our Rafaela? I will never stop looking for Ophelia. But I can't live in this tomb with someone who has buried themselves. Get out. Get out of here. You never really loved Rafaela, you just pretended. Leonila saw the pain in his eyes, but she couldn't stop. She knew it wasn't true. Silvio loved their daughter more than life itself, but what he had just done couldn't be. Silvio shook his head and left. Leonila rushed to the door, flung it open, and shouted, I hate you. I hate you. It should have been you instead of my little girl. She slammed the door shut and slowly slid down to the floor. Leonila didn't cry, there were simply no tears left. Where would they come from when she had been shedding them for the past 6 years? Rafaela was not just a long-awaited child in the family, she was a miracle they had stopped expecting. After their wedding, Leonila and Silvio decided that their first child would definitely be a girl. The miracle didn't take long to happen. 3 months after their wedding, Leonila became pregnant. She rushed home from work to surprise her husband. Leonila decided to set the table, have a candlelit dinner, and not tell Silvio the reason until the end of the meal. She knew he had to, he simply had to figure it out. In principle, everything worked out just as Leonila had expected. But Silvio guessed it faster than she had anticipated. They had just sat down at the table when he asked, Leonila, you behaved so unusually today. Your eyes are sparkling. This dinner. Is there something you want to tell me? Leonila smiled. I do, but a little later. Or maybe you'll figure it out yourself. There was no need to say anything more. Silvio, like a spring, leaped up from his chair, rushed to Leonila, and scooped her up. A girl, is it a girl? She laughed, pushed him away, and shouted, Silly, let me go. I don't know yet. From that day on, Leonila could only relax. Silvio didn't even allow her to wash the dishes. Leonila wanted to do something, but she only occasionally managed to be in the kitchen while he was cooking. She had a miscarriage at 5 months. One night, when they had been asleep for a long time, Leonila woke up from excruciating pain in her stomach and back. She couldn't hold back, she screamed. Silvio didn't understand right away what had happened, and when he did, he grabbed the phone. The doctors couldn't do anything and said that, in this case, the pregnancy couldn't be saved. It took Leonila a year to recover. For a whole year, she couldn't watch the children in the yard without crying. For a whole year, she didn't watch movies because almost all of them ended happily with the birth of a child. For a year, she didn't let her husband near her. She even had to see a therapist. Gradually, she started to heal, began to smile, and even told her husband. It hurts so much. I'm so sorry, but we're still so young. We'll make it through this. 3 years passed, and Leonila became pregnant again. She registered with a doctor early on and followed all the medical advice. She was hospitalized twice for no apparent reason, just to calm her own nerves. A miscarriage occurred at 5.5 months. This time, Silvio got scared. He was afraid that Leonila would lose her mind. But this time, she reacted more calmly to everything, although she had probably just learned to hide her pain. When she became pregnant again, it took another 5 years. Leonila firmly told Silvio, "I'm going to have an abortion." He nearly fell down. "Are you out of your mind? What are you saying?" "Silvio, there will be another miscarriage anyway. Right now, there's no child, it's just an embryo. It can't think because it has nothing to think about yet. But later, it will be a human being. I won't survive a third time." He understood her perfectly. Even though Silvio wanted to cry and beg at her feet, he backed down. "You decide, that's how it will be." She left. He was pacing around the apartment but didn't call. He was too afraid to hear the phrase, "It's over." She only returned late at night. Silvio rushed to her. "Leonila." But his wife sank into the armchair and cried. "I couldn't do it. I couldn't, do you understand?" And then Rafaela was born. When they first brought the little girl to Leonila, she was holding her in her arms, silently examining her while tears filled her eyes. Leonila herself was smiling, but she had happy tears. "Hello, little one. Welcome." Mom called her daughter Rafaela, and Dad called her Ophelia. They didn't even know why. Probably, they wanted their daughter to be special even in this. And she was. At 4 years old, Rafaela confidently recited long poems by heart. At 5, she could read and count quite well. And at 6, she was about to start learning English, but she didn't get the chance. She got lost and disappeared. It could be called anything, but the essence remained the same. Rafaela was no longer with them. Sometimes Leonila thought it would have been better if her daughter had died. She would have known that Rafaela was in heaven and that she was happy there. But now, every minute, new horrors emerged in Leonila's mind, the number of children who disappeared and, when it was revealed, what had happened to them. All of this made her have shivers down her spine. Then Leonila pushed these thoughts away, scolded herself with harsh words, cursed, and tried to think that she and Rafaela would definitely meet again. The woman got up from the floor and approached the mirror. At first, she even recoiled when she saw herself there. Leonila tried to remember her age. She was 36, almost 37. But in the mirror, she saw a half-crazy old lady around 70 years old. Her hair was unkempt, and her skin was gray. She looked at her hands, and they were the same. Nails were broken in some places, others were long and shapeless. But who cared about her appearance? Somewhere inside, a small voice whispered, "Your daughter will never recognize her mother in you if you ever find her." Leonila collapsed onto the couch. She fell into another fit of hysteria. Silvio, how could he? They shared the same sorrow. Silvio couldn't find peace. Under no circumstances would he ever leave Leonila, especially in her current state. But after the conversation with the doctor, he had no choice. He would gladly give his life if it would help Leonila, but only she could help herself. Understand, as long as you take care of her and do everything for her, she will continue to hide in her shell and eventually go mad. To be honest, I don't understand how she's managed to stay sane. She needs a push. No matter how much a person suffers, human instincts will eventually prevail. She will need something to eat. To do that, she'll need to go to the store. You must help her break out of her shell. And then, if you see progress, you'll explain everything. But what if she doesn't forgive me if she pushes me away? That could also happen. You'll hurt her too much. In her current state, it will be worse than any betrayal, so you need to decide if you're willing to sacrifice everything to save your wife. Everything? He had no reason to live, and he didn't even have a life. Yes, there was Leonila, but she didn't occupy as much space as the pain of their missing daughter. He didn't think for long. Yes, doctor, I'm ready. They carefully thought about what to say and do. The most crucial moments were the first few hours after Silvio's departure. During that time, Leonila might do something irreversible. Both of them were afraid of this, so they had to involve their neighbor, who would come to Leonila with some strange request. It might be a weird one, but the most important thing was that someone should have distracted Leonila for a moment. The neighbor called for a long time. Leonila heard that the door on the landing opened, so she decided not to open it, but the continuous ringing started to annoy her. She jumped up, wiped her face, and rushed to the door. She flung it open so forcefully that she almost knocked Agata off her feet. Leonila, save me. She was taken aback by such pressure. What happened, Agata? Leonila, my cat, broke a vase and then jumped on her, hurting its paw. I couldn't handle it, I couldn't look after it. And he's the only one I have. Leonila weakly smiled. Okay, Agata. They spent half an hour trying to catch the cat. A couple of times, Leonila even smiled. Then they spent just as much time searching for the paw that he had supposedly injured. Agata, are you sure he actually hurt something? Of course. He jumped on the shards and then limped away. And that's it? Maybe he was just fooling around, or a piece got stuck between his toes and then fell out. You think? No, he's such a rascal. Made me all nervous. He should buy me calming pills. Agata looked at the cat, who was hiding under the bed, but now apparently decided that the danger had passed. Leonila, let's have a coffee for a successful undertaking. Leonila wanted to decline but nodded for some reason, probably because she didn't want to go back to the pain-filled apartment. Agata made some coffee and poured it. Leonila picked a strawberry from the jar and said thoughtfully, "It's Rafaela's favorite jam." Leonila, is there any news? Leonila shook her head. Nothing, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. To her surprise, she realized that she could talk about what happened. It was painful and terrifying, as if it tore her soul apart, but she managed to say something. They stayed up all night, and when Leonila went to her room, Agata called Silvio. Leonila just left. Oh, Silvio, my heart is breaking. My heart is breaking, and it's even worse for her. I think she's sleeping now. She was about to fall asleep right here. Thank you, Agata. No, what are you thanking me for? There's no reason to say thank you here. It's as if she's thawing a little. I'll invite her over tomorrow for my signature pie. And Leonila was truly sleeping by then, soundly sleeping, holding a portrait of her little Rafaela close. Each time she fell asleep, she asked God to let her dream of her daughter come true. But God didn't seem to hear her at all, neither back when she wandered the streets nor now. Leonila had long ago decided that if God had decreed that she should endure all of this, she didn't need such a God. For 3 days, Leonila just lay there. Agata couldn't coax her out for the signature pie. Leonila simply said she wasn't feeling well, that she wanted to sleep, and closed the door. After 3 days, she got up, made herself some coffee, and then went to the bathroom. 3 hours later, she was meticulously filing her nails and adjusting her eyebrows with tweezers, trying to regain a human appearance. As she did this, she muttered, "No, I won't give up. I can handle everything on my own. I'll find my daughter." It turned out to not be as simple as she thought. During her very first job interview, Leonila burst into tears. The company's director looked at her in astonishment. "I'm sorry, did my questions upset you this much?" No, it's my personal matter." He waited for Leonila to calm down and then said, "You understand that I can't hire you. We are a young and growing company. Do you think we'd attract more clients if a manager suddenly burst into tears mid-conversation? I'm sorry." After the first interview, Leonila spent nearly a week in distress. Eventually, she pulled herself together and set out to find a job. She realized that if she didn't change something in her life, she would simply lose her mind. Leonila Santos. The woman turned around. It felt uncomfortable that someone called her by her maiden name. She not only disliked revisiting that time, but also hated it. There was a woman, smiling. Leonila had a hard time remembering who she was. "Nora, is that you?" "It's me." "Oh my God, I was wondering if I might be mistaken." "Leonila, I'm so glad to see you." Once upon a time, Leonila lived in a workers' settlement. In reality, it was only called that because the factory that the settlement was associated with had long ceased to exist. The walls were still there, but nothing more. The nearest town was almost an hour away, and the people in the settlement had simply given up. Most families resorted to heavy drinking. Leonila shuddered as she remembered the dirty streets, run-down houses, plastic sheets on the windows during winter instead of proper second panes, poverty, and filth. Nora's parents, who were her classmates along with Leonila through middle school, froze to death after getting drunk right in their yard, just a few meters from their door. They didn't even make it to the doorstep. Nora was taken to an orphanage, and nobody ever saw her again. Leonila used to envy her immensely at the time. Now Nora had a different life, not like Leonila's. Their class had all kinds of children. Most were like Leonila, ashamed of their parents and ashamed of their clothes. They never ventured anywhere, but there were also others. Those whose parents were struggling to survive. For example, Hilario's parents were heavily involved in the illegal liquor trade and lent money. Those who borrowed from them later worked in their garden or at their household. There was a girl named Marina, and her mother worked at a store, divorced her husband long ago, and had affairs with other men. There were a few more kids who lived far better than Nora or Leonila. This exclusive group not only mocked the rest, but also occasionally beat up those who dared to go out on their own. Leonila was sure that nearly all of them would face the same future, but she wasn't ready to accept it. Leonila's parents had alcohol intoxication due to low-quality alcohol just around the time of her graduation. Naturally, she didn't attend her graduation ceremony because there was simply no way to do so. By the way, on the day of the final exams, Marina discussed this with the entire class. "Well, Leonila, are you going to dazzle us with a stunning outfit at the graduation?" Leonila remained silent, unwilling to respond because she realized that nothing good would come out of it. But Marina persisted, trying to provoke Leonila with words. When their taunts went too far, Leonila rushed into a fight with Marina. At that time, no one could break up the fight, and Leonila had scratched Marina's face considerably. She felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that Marina would attend the graduation with visible scratches that no dress could hide. On the very same day, Marina's mother came running to Leonila's home. "You wretch, an outcast, trash. You'll end up in jail." A week after the funerals, paid for by the local council, Leonila fled the village. She had a little money in her pocket, not even enough for a bus ticket. She hitchhiked to the city, took up a job as a hospital orderly, then rented a tiny room from an old lady in exchange for helping with cooking and cleaning. She enrolled in college that autumn. She later found another part-time job. A year later, she managed to rent a small apartment, and after graduating from college, she successfully landed a job where she eventually met Silvio. She had disclosed to him, just once, where she used to live and how, and asked him never to mention it again. Silvio never broke that promise, which Leonila was immensely grateful for. "Leonila, let's go to a cafe and talk." She waved her hand. "Fine, let's go." They sat down in the nearest cafe, and Leonila said, "Nora, you look really good. Tell me about yourself." "Oh, Leonila, everything's fine. I was upset when they brought me to the orphanage at first. I cried, but then I got used to it. There isn't much good there, of course, but it's much better than at home. And, as I later figured out, they offer extra educational opportunities there, and in my situation, that's all that could have helped. Leonila, I studied so hard that there was no time for sleep. I memorized languages and learned about computers there. I saw a computer for the first time in the orphanage. Basically, I have everything I want. I finished my education and got married. My husband and I opened our own company just a couple of years ago. We have 2 boys. I'll definitely introduce you to them. What about you? I understand you don't visit your hometown either." "No, Nora, I have no desire to do it. The truth is, my life isn't going as smoothly as yours. Leonila, tell me. It might help you to talk about it, and who knows, maybe I might be able to help you in some way." Leonila talked for a long time. It seemed she needed to get things off her chest, and Nora was listening attentively. How can this be? So many years and no breakthrough? No, Nora, nothing. Nora placed her hand on Leonila's. "You're doing great. You're right not to give up. You have to believe. And I'll help you with the job. Come to our place tomorrow. I'll introduce you to my husband, Rodrigo. I'm sure he'll come up with something." Nora wrote down her address, gave Leonila her phone number, and they parted ways. The woman was watching Leonila walking away for a long time. Her heart was just breaking, and she couldn't even begin to imagine what Leonila felt. The next morning, Leonila had another interview. Honestly, she didn't want to ask Nora for help. Perhaps it felt uncomfortable, or maybe it was because Nora came from her past. But it did make her feel a little better. They say that talking to someone can lighten the soul's burden. The interview, however, ended in failure again. This time, Leonila refused the job herself. The boss had been looking at her with such creepy eyes that Leonila almost felt it physically. When he suggested continuing the discussion in a more personal setting, Leonila stormed out. "Don't get closer to me." She ran out of the office and down the stairs, with the secretary sadly watching her. The company was steadily going downhill since they hired that old philanderer as their boss. Leonila wandered the streets for a long time, and for some reason, all her thoughts revolved around her husband. How could Silvio do this to her? Leonila thought he truly loved her, but he left her in such a state. She couldn't wrap her head around it. Her resentment towards Silvio was so strong that the mere thought of him made her cry. "That's enough." Leonila resolutely took the piece of paper with Nora's address out of her pocket. "Nora, yes, Nora." They welcomed her warmly. "Leonila, come in. I was so afraid you wouldn't come. To be honest, I wasn't planning to. I understand. I try not to think about where I was born. Come in." Nora's husband came out to greet them from the room. He resembled a good-natured teddy bear, a bit on the plump side, not very tall, with incredibly kind eyes and a smile all over his face. "Hello. Nora was waiting for you, and we've been waiting too. She's prepared so much delicious food, but she won't let us touch it. She says, you'll eat when the guests arrive." Nora playfully nudged her husband. "No big deal, you need to lighten up sometimes." Rodrigo sighed. And so it is in everything. Leonila couldn't help but smile. Everything was so nice and cozy here, with genuine warmth. In a matter of seconds, two boys flew over to her. They simultaneously reached out their hands. The slightly older one introduced himself. Basilio. The other one echoed. Rodrigo. Leonila laughed and felt startled. For the first time in 6 years, she laughed. It was unusual, and it scared her. She almost pinched her lips. Nora noticed this abrupt change in Leonila and quickly said, "Leonila, let's sit at the table. My boys are too hungry." Everything on the table was so delicious. Rodrigo brought wine in a pitcher. "Here, Leonila, you must try this. I make it myself, following a recipe." Leonila had never been a drinker. Fresh memories from her childhood were still vivid. Maybe a glass of wine at a wedding or a sip for a toast on an anniversary. She looked at the wine as a rabbit might at a snake, then said, "Well, let's give it a try." The wine turned out to be sweet and light, and Leonila hadn't even noticed when she had drunk 2 glasses. "Rodrigo, if I, a non-drinker, enjoy your wine so much, you're simply a genius." Rodrigo smiled and turned to his wife. "That's right, I started with a quest for the finest wine, none of that buy something from the store for me." Nora smiled and explained to Leonila. "Rodrigo is quite the explorer here. He's determined to achieve everything himself. It all began when we bought our country house. His fascination lasted for 3 years. Now, our neighbors come on excursions to our house because what's growing and bearing fruit there really shouldn't be growing there. Then Rodrigo decided to make wine. As you can understand, after his fascination, we have our vineyard, apricots, and all sorts of other things. Someday, you'll visit us at our country house, and I'll take you to the wine cellar he built specifically for his wines. There's quite an assortment there. I can't even remember all the names." Leonila enjoyed listening to all of this. It was lovely being their guest. However, she had come for a purpose. "Rodrigo, Nora, I wanted to talk about work. If you have any connections or if you could give me some advice." Rodrigo cleared his throat and turned from a teddy bear into a serious businessman in an instant. "Leonila, do you have an education?" "Yes, of course. I even worked in my field for almost 5 years. Then, my husband thought I needed a break and a fresh start. You see, Nora and I want to expand our business. We need more people, but not just anyone who will come, do their time, and leave. We want those who will be genuinely interested in the results." "What does your company do?" "Well, in the beginning, we were just laying down private yard communications. Then Nora insisted, and we added cleaning, tree removal, and a few other services. Now we want to introduce a landscaping service. In more fashionable terms, it's the services of landscape designers, not just for project design, but also for implementing them." "Oh, that's so interesting." Leonila was listening with wide open eyes, and Rodrigo continued. "We need someone who could be a kind of accountant and the director of this particular department. What do you think? Do you think you could handle it?" "I'd love to give it a try, but I don't know anything about landscape design." "Well, you're not alone. We'll learn together. Rodrigo, Nora, I won't let you down. Leonila, you haven't even asked about the salary." Rodrigo laughed. "The job is interesting. I'll take it even if the pay isn't much." "Well, that's not serious. Let's put it this way, we won't disappoint you. Besides, if things go well, the salary will improve, of course." 2 days later, Leonila started her new job. For about a week, she was getting into the groove of things. She even gave Rodrigo a few pieces of advice about document management, for which he was very grateful. "Leonila, you're a natural-born accountant. My paperwork is a complete mess. Rodrigo, how about I review and organize it once a week? Besides, your company is so modern, and you're still using paper." Rodrigo waved it off. Nora scolds me for that too, but I find it comforting and reliable somehow. 6 months passed. Leonila was walking home from work when she suddenly bumped into someone. She looked up. There was Silvio. "Hello, Leonila. You look great." His eyes looked sorrowful. He had lost weight, and he seemed different. Leonila's heart pounded fiercely. A month after Silvio left, she had reevaluated many things and concluded that he had done it all for her. And it had worked. It had worked perfectly. She decided to call him herself. He had tried calling several times, but Leonila had simply ignored the calls. She had held the phone for a while and then finally dialed the number. A female voice answered. "Hello." Leonila was taken aback. "Silvio." "Can I hear her, Silvio?" "No, you can't. Silvio is having a shower. Besides, leave him alone. He's just beginning to recover." The woman hung up, and Leonila had been staring at the phone for a long time. She couldn't believe it. She just couldn't accept it. It hurt. It hurt a lot. But that call seemed to give her strength. So, that's how it was, right? Well, that's all right. She was strong. She could handle this. Leonila tried to think less about her husband. She filed for divorce. He called often, and she hung up every time. But then she answered the phone. "Hey, Leonila, it makes me so happy to hear your voice. For me not. And please, don't call me anymore. What if the person who's now answering your calls finds out?" She hung up and blocked Silvio's number. "Thank you. I can't say the same about you. You don't look happy." Silvio sadly smiled. "How are you? How's everything going?" "I'm fine. You don't need to worry. Can I go now?" Leonila tried to walk around him, but Silvio grabbed her hand. "Leonila, please, let me explain. It's not exactly what you think." She pulled her hand away. "You know, I'm very sorry that I thought well of you. I thought you left just to shake me up, but how wrong I was. Leonila, I don't want to see you." She continued down the street. Silvio was watching her go. She looked beautiful, dressed in fashion. But her gaze remained the same, lost and sad. When he left Leonila, he felt so terrible that he called the same doctor he had consulted before. It was Ariel who advised him to take this step. "Hello, it's... Good afternoon. I recognized you, Silvio. Has something happened? I left my wife." "And how?" "It seems like everything you told me. At least she started leaving the house." "Well, there we go. It's just that your voice doesn't sound right to me. Maybe you could come over? We can talk." Silvio was relieved. He hoped that talking to Ariel would ease his burden even slightly. "Is that convenient?" "Of course, no problem. But there's a renovation in my office. Come directly to my place. Around 7. I'll send you a message with the address." Silvio wanted to object, saying that going to her place was not convenient and that he would come next time, but Ariel had already hung up. Calling back to decline felt awkward. Silvio bought a small cake. He didn't want to arrive empty-handed. Ariel welcomed him in a robe. Silvio noticed her beautiful body right away and quickly scolded himself. Leonila had kept him at a distance for a long time, but that wasn't an excuse. The curtains in the room were covered, and a small table was set. "Please come in." Silvio swallowed nervously. His initial thought was to run away, but he didn't have the chance. Ariel moved close to him, put her arms around him, and said, "Come on, relax. You're a free man, after all." And he betrayed Leonila. The night was simply magical. In the morning, Silvio headed to the shower, but when he came out, Ariel was talking on his phone. He rushed to her, but she had already hung up. "What's wrong? Are you upset? I thought you were enjoying it." He understood that he couldn't blame Leonila entirely. No one had forced him against his will. But he didn't want to see her anymore. Ariel called a couple more times, but he didn't answer. He knew Leonila. If he could somehow explain why he had left her, it was impossible to explain why he had betrayed her. Leonila turned the corner of the building and stopped to catch her breath. Only she knew how close she had come to breaking down, to grabbing Silvio, and to screaming about how much she missed him. She was barely holding on. Her face was flushed, even though it was late autumn, and the wind kept bringing cold raindrops. She was leaning against the wall, crying. Oh, the pain in her heart. It took her 10 minutes before she could move again. She peeled herself off the wall and continued walking. She had just a short distance to reach her home, passing through a small park with a pond. Leonila walked on, her gaze fixed ahead. Mommy! The woman jolted to a stop, her heart ready to leap out of her chest. Mommy! A piercing cry. Leonila was disoriented. She couldn't figure out where the cry was coming from. The park was completely empty. When Leonila glanced at the pond one more time, she noticed a splash. She understood everything. Someone was drowning, probably a child. The child cried out and then disappeared under the water. Leonila rushed towards the pond at full speed, taking off her coat and boots on the way and shouting, "Help!" Perhaps someone would hear and come to her aid. She jumped into the water. The cold stung her, making her gasp for breath. Within seconds, Leonila was where she had seen something. She dived. The pond was not deep, just about 2 meters, and she immediately grabbed something soft, probably a jacket. Leonila pulled it up and realized it was the child. She quickly brought the child to the surface and then herself. Holding the child's head above the water, the woman made her way to the shore. Several people were bustling there, apparently having heard her. The temperature had dropped in the evening. Leonila was lying there in some sort of oblivion when she suddenly saw her daughter. She had noticeably grown. Mommy! Rafaela, my dear, you're back? Leonila wanted to jump up, run to her daughter, and embrace her, but the girl shook her head negatively. No, Mommy. I feel very bad, and you're not taking me back. Rafaela, sweetheart, tell me where you are, and I'll come get you right away. I can't, Mommy. I'll get in a lot of trouble for this. You're not looking for me in the right place at all. Her daughter started to move away, as if disappearing into a fog. Rafaela, Rafaela, don't go. Leonila screamed and struggled, but she couldn't seem to open her eyes. Agata, who lived through the wall, was startled by her cries. Oh, my God, the girl is in terrible condition. I need to call Silvio. Silvio rushed over in 15 minutes. Aunt Agata was waiting for him in the hallway. What's going on there? Keep it down, Silvio. Maybe I shouldn't have called you. He pressed the doorbell and rang for a long time, but no one opened the door. So he took out his keys. Just hope she hasn't changed the locks. The key worked. Silvio rushed into the apartment, followed by Agata. Leonila was lying on the floor near the couch. Agata screamed. Oh, God! Silvio hurried to Leonila. Leonila. She opened her eyes slightly. I was talking to our little girl. She closed her eyes again, and Silvio, picking her up, placed her on the couch. She has a high fever, we need an ambulance. 20 minutes later, the ambulance took Leonila and Silvio away, and Agata watched them go. Well, what can I say? It's a severe case of lung inflammation with a high fever. But there's something else. Your wife refuses to wake up. She keeps whispering someone's name, and it's as if she doesn't want to come to us, as if she's doing well somewhere in oblivion. Rafaela, who is that? Doctor, that's our daughter. She disappeared 6, almost 7, years ago. Leonila is still suffering from it. That's not good. A lot depends on whether the person wants to get better. Your wife. I haven't seen any signs of it yet. Silvio was torn between his job and Leonila. Right after work, he rushed to the hospital and stayed there all night. 2 days later, his boss called him in. Silvio, we've known each other for a long time. What's going on? There was no point in hiding anything. He told the story from the very beginning, starting from the moment he left Leonila. Well, I don't know what to say. Okay, go. I'll give you a week. Do whatever you want, but make sure to get your wife back on her feet within that time. Silvio sincerely thanked his boss and immediately rushed to the hospital. The doctor said that Leonila was just asleep. She had woken up, but they gave her an injection. Right now, it was better for her to sleep. Silvio was sitting with his wife. Well, his ex-wife now. He was sitting silently for a long time and then began to speak. Leonila, what have I done? I've always loved you, and I still do. I just wanted you to start living again, you know? He talked for a long time, telling her everything about Ariel and how it had all happened. He begged for forgiveness. He avoided only one topic. He didn't say a word about Rafaela. He simply couldn't. If anyone thinks that the pain of losing a child dulls over time, they are sorely mistaken. The fact that a person continues to live, goes to work, talks, and doesn't mention their pain means that they have learned to live with it. He hadn't even realized that he had fallen asleep, resting his head on Leonila's hand. She woke up, not knowing if her husband's speech had been a dream or if he had really said all those things. When she saw his bowed head, she smiled. So it wasn't a dream. Leonila carefully freed her hand and gently stroked Silvio's hair. My dear, forgive me. Silvio woke up immediately, pressing his lips against Leonila's hand, but he didn't get a chance to say anything. The door creaked open, and a tall man in a suit, more like an athlete from the cover of a fashion magazine, appeared at the threshold. Hello, I found you with great difficulty. How could you do that? Leonila looked at him in surprise, and Silvio didn't understand anything either. In one hand, the man was holding an enormous bouquet of flowers, and in the other, a large bag. He glanced around, then handed the bouquet to Silvio and peered into the corridor. Please call a doctor here. His voice faded somewhere into the ceiling. Silvio looked at Leonila in astonishment, as if asking who this was, but she shrugged in confusion. The man turned to them. My name is Giorgio Domingo. I'm the father of that girl you pulled out of the pond. Silvio, in surprise, looked at Leonila. Out of the pond? Leonila shrugged. Well, young man, I assume you're the husband of this heroic woman. Silvio smiled awkwardly. Yes. You are very lucky. You have a superwoman for a wife. If not for her, I would have lost my daughter. You see, she has no mother. My wife passed away when Germana was just 4. We were always together. I tried to provide her with everything to ensure she lacked nothing. She had everything her classmates didn't. But, as it turned out, she didn't need all that. She needed attention, and I have a demanding job. I run a large company. I physically couldn't spend much time with her, although, well, I could have made more time, but I thought it was enough. We started to argue. It irritated me that a 10-year-old girl dared to contradict me. We also had a fight that day. She wanted to scare me, but something went wrong. In short, if it weren't for your Leonila. But she was calling for her mom. Yes, when she feels unwell or has a bad dream, she always calls for her mom. She must be missing her terribly. Leonila sighed. Someone loses a mother, someone loses a daughter. Why is the world so unjust? Giorgio explained that, in addition to his construction materials sales and manufacturing firm, he also had his own security agency. He thanked Leonila profusely, asked if there was anything he could do, then left his business card. Any time of day or night, for any matter. If you need to build a house, contact me. If you need someone to get rid of, contact me too. Just kidding, of course. The day of Leonila's discharge was approaching. Giorgio called several times, inquiring if they needed anything. But what could a person need who, after Giorgio's conversation with the doctor, was immediately transferred to a VIP ward? Silvio didn't ask anything and didn't say anything. He was prepared to take Leonila home and return to the dormitory himself. When everything was packed and Leonila was dressed, she looked at Silvio. "Well, shall we go home?" He quickly turned to her. "Leonila." "Later, Silvio. We'll talk about everything later. Let's just go home." "Home?" "Yes." He wanted to grab Leonila and kiss her, speak warm words, and promise that he would never. But Silvio remained silent. They were learning to live together again. Leonila had changed, and so had Silvio. He had become more attentive and was now able to see and hear what his wife needed. Leonila introduced him to Nora and her family, and they immediately decided that they all should have been friends together. Nora sighed for a long time, telling Leonila that her husband loved her so much that it shouldn't have been allowed to go this far. His mistake would now live with them. However, Leonila firmly said, "Nora, I respect your opinion, but we'll figure it out on our own." For a month now, Silvio and Leonila have been living together again. He was a bit nervous because their daughter's birthday was approaching. On that day, Leonila seemed to go crazy, and he didn't know what to expect now, but he was afraid. He was also afraid because Rafaela had disappeared on her birthday. But everything turned out fine. Leonila only asked to be taken to church, but Silvio asked not to go with her. She was gone for a while, then she came out, and they went back home. While Silvio was preparing dinner, he occasionally teased his wife. Leonila had gone into the room. When he checked on her, he almost cried. Leonila was sleeping, hugging Marcelo. Marcelo was a well-worn rabbit who had slept with Rafaela from the day she was born. They had tried to persuade the little girl to switch to a newer toy, but she had refused. After Rafaela disappeared, they hid away in the cupboard. Silvio didn't wake her, he just covered her with a blanket and quietly left the room. Silvio had barely fallen asleep when he was awakened by Leonila's scream. He rushed into the room. "Leonila, what happened?" Her eyes were absolutely wild. "I saw Rafaela in my dream again. She was calling me and saying that I needed to find her. She said something else about it possibly being too late if I don't hurry. And I can't remember what else she said, Silvio. It's something very important. I'm not going insane, it was as if it were real." For a week, Leonila had been acting differently, and then she decisively stated, "Silvio, I need to go back home to where I was born." "Why?" "I don't fully understand yet, but I need to. Rafaela mentioned something about the past, like look back or search in the past." "Leonila, it was just a dream, and you know that." "No, Silvio. Was it a dream or not? It haunts me. I will go. Maybe I'll find a clue there. Rafaela has never appeared in my dreams so often. She's crying, she's calling for help. All right. Let's wait for the weekend, and I'll take you." "No, Silvio. I'm going by the evening train today, and you come on the weekend." "Leonila, why the rush?" She looked into his eyes, and Silvio understood that arguing was useless. He helped her pack, then took her to the train station. "Can't you wait just a bit?" "No, I can't. Please understand me." She saw him standing alone on the platform. Rain was starting, but Silvio didn't move. Leonila took her seat and closed her eyes. In her memory appeared that fateful day. It was Rafaela's birthday. Silvio and Leonila convinced her to celebrate it on the weekend. "Sweetie, we'll just stay at home and have a cake. But on the weekend, we can go to the park. You remember, it's the city's festival this weekend." "I remember, of course." Rafaela pondered, then pouted. "What about presents?" "We'll give you the presents as usual on your birthday." Rafaela clapped her hands. Then yes, I agree. They prepared diligently for the city festival, which they combined with Rafaela's birthday. Rafaela got a new polka-dotted dress and 2 matching ribbons. The girl fidgeted in front of the mirror all morning. Mom, when are we going? Sweetie, just a little more patience. Why should we go when nothing has started yet? Rafaela sighed. All right, I'll wait a little longer. When they arrived at the park, Leonila was slightly overwhelmed by the crowds. She held Rafaela's hand tightly. They watched the concert for a while, then went to a cafe and headed to the amusement park. An hour later, Rafaela was tired. Mom, let's get some ice cream and sit on that bench over there. Silvio chuckled. I'm all for that. He hurried to the bench, and Rafaela went with her mother to the ice cream stand. Rafaela, which one do you want? The pistachio one. They waved to Silvio and joined the queue. Leonila released Rafaela's hand for just a minute while she paid for the ice cream, and when she turned back, hold onto your ice cream. But the little girl was nowhere in sight. Leonila wasn't alarmed at first. Rafaela was very curious and could easily become distracted. She looked around but couldn't see her daughter anywhere in the crowd. People, so many people, but no sign of her daughter at all. Leonila's legs went weak. She desperately glanced at the bench where Silvio was sitting, but he was alone. Rafaela. The people around them grew concerned. Silvio leaped up from the bench and rushed towards her. Rafaela. Someone was calling the police, and someone helped Leonila regain her composure. They didn't sleep for 3 days. With the police and volunteers, they searched through the park, then the nearby streets, and eventually the whole city. Divers searched the pond in the park. Rafaela had vanished without a trace. Everyone who had been in the park was questioned, but who could notice anything amidst such chaos? Excuse me, are you all right? Leonila opened her eyes and quickly wiped away her tears. Yes, I'm fine. The train attendant looked at her closely. If you need anything, just let me know. No, thank you very much. Everything's fine. The attendant checked on her several more times, but Leonila pretended to be asleep. She couldn't sleep at all. The closer she got to her hometown, the heavier her heart felt. She loathed this place with every fiber of her being. She stepped off the platform. Nothing had changed. It was all the same old, gloomy, shabby town. Leonila shivered. It was much colder here than in the big city. She pulled up her collar and walked towards the exit. If she wasn't mistaken, there should have been taxis waiting somewhere around here. She was right. There were indeed a few cars lined up at the station. She approached the cleanest one. Excuse me, how much will it cost to go to the village? 1,000. The driver didn't even turn his head towards her. He was probably hoping she'd find it too expensive and change her mind. Although, why was he here if he didn't want the job in the first place? Most likely, he was just unfriendly, and that was fine with Leonila because she had no desire to engage in conversation. Sure, all right. Can I put my bag in the trunk? The man, who had been lazily cracking sunflower seeds, looked away from his snack and asked, Are you alone? Yes. Then toss your bag in the back seat. Leonila smirked. In reality, she had hoped he would get out and help her. She had also wanted to sit in the back, but she didn't have a choice. She managed to squeeze her large travel bag into the car and sat down beside him. The man emptied the remaining sunflower seeds from his pocket with a hint of regret. So, are we ready to go? Let's go. Surprisingly, the taxi driver drove very cautiously. They were silent at first, but it seemed he got bored and wanted to chat. Who are you visiting in the village? I know almost everyone there. I'm not visiting anyone. I used to live there. So, you're selling a house? Leonila smiled. Who needs that house there anyway? Well, don't be too sure. The village is pretty bustling right now. Some farmers moved in. He is a bit sketchy, of course, but he runs a successful farm. He's built some cottages by the river. People come there to relax. And the villagers supply the newcomers with everything from their gardens, as well as meat and milk. And they buy it? They certainly do. They love it. Tell me, do you live in a big city? Yes, in the big city. If you had the choice, would you buy milk from a store or from a nice lady in the village? Well, if the lady is clean and tidy, why not? Well, nowadays, they're decent. It's not like in the old days. By the way, there's an influx of people into the village now. They're buying homes and building houses. It can't be. There's no work there. Exactly. They're coming here mostly for their well-deserved retirement. But it's been good for the village. It's flourishing with flowers and beautiful houses. Leonila was listening to it but couldn't believe it. That village, or more accurately, the workers' settlement, wasn't decaying any longer, it was improving. No, she couldn't believe it. Well, let's assume that new people moved in, but I bet the locals are still drinking. They are, of course. You can't do without it. But not everyone. Over the past few years, anyone under 40 has left for the district center or even farther. I see you're quite familiar with the village. Very familiar. So, during their chat, they quietly arrived in the village. Where should I drop you off? Just let me out at the very beginning. I'll walk from here. With that suitcase? It's on wheels. Well, suit yourself. The man stopped by the first house. His face was much friendlier than when Leonila first got into the car. She couldn't help but smirk to herself, thinking, that's what it means to just have a conversation with someone. Forgive me for not helping you. My back is aching, I walk with a limp. I get in a taxi like this for a few hours just to support my family. Leonila felt embarrassed. She hadn't thought highly of a genuinely good person. Don't worry, I'll manage. She took out her suitcase and handed him the fare, not 1,000, but 1,500. Thank you. You're giving too much. I don't need the extra. That's for the pleasant conversation. Well then, thank you. The car drove away, and as Leonila murmured to herself, I would have never bought anything if I'd known it was from the village. She adjusted the bag's handle for comfort and slowly strolled through the village. She gazed at the houses with a strange, painful interest. There were plenty of new and beautiful ones, but some still looked as they did when she lived there. Those homes made Leonila feel like time had stopped, and she was once again a little hurt. Here was Emilio's house. He was a grade ahead of Leonila in school. He often used to wander around the streets drunk. She wondered what had become of him. Before she could contemplate it further, Emilio practically tumbled out of the gate, and a disheveled, rather young woman followed. You scoundrel, give me that cologne. It's worth money. Can't you really get drunk? She threw Emilio to the ground, professionally searched his pockets, found the bottle, and then left him with a rude gesture. There you go. Emilio roared, but the woman was already sprinting towards the house, slamming the door behind her. He started pounding his fists on the door. Leonila moved on. On her way, she passed by a rather decent-looking house. It had 2 stories and was clad with siding. As she got closer, Leonila figured it was likely the farmer's house. The house wasn't just big, it was huge. Its fence seemed to stretch far along the river. I wonder, does he hire workers or do all the work himself? Leonila noticed she was talking to herself, felt embarrassed, and hurried her pace. But there she was at Hilario's house. Strangely, he was the big shot in their village, but now his house looked like it was inhabited by homeless people. Had they all become accustomed to their own mess? Well, it served them right. Finally, Leonila reached her own house. Strangely, nothing was broken, and all the boards were in place. The house looked no worse than the other old houses, all overgrown with weeds. On the way, some man on a bicycle was coming towards her. He stared so intently at Leonila that he hit a puddle with his tire and almost fell. He cursed and then walked up to her. "Can I help you? Are you looking for someone?" "No, I'm not looking for anyone. Could you help me?" He looked surprised and then extended his hand. "Leonila, is that you?" Leonila scrutinized him but couldn't recognize him. "Sorry? I'm Nacho." "Well, you were a grade ahead. I'm Fernandez's son." "Oh, Nacho. I would have never recognized you in a million years." "Well, it's not that surprising. Adults don't pay attention to kids. How can I help you?" "I need to remove these boards and at least mow a path to the porch." He looked at her strangely. "Are you staying for good?" "No, not permanently. Maybe I can sell the house." The explanation satisfied Nacho. "Sit on the bench and don't go in there. You'll scratch yourself and your clothes. I'll quickly run home and grab some tools. If you want, I can invite Prudencia to help you." "Prudencia? You mean Prudencia Alonso?" "Exactly. She's my wife." Leonila looked at Nacho. "Well, this is news. Prudencia and Nacho? I'd have never thought. Life had its own rules, sometimes completely unpredictable. Can I ask you something, Nacho?" "Sure, go ahead." "Nacho, I've seen a couple of people here, and, in general. Don't you drink?" He chuckled. "Well, how should I say it? I can, of course, but I don't really like it. Prudencia just drinks a little wine. It's tough, of course, to live sober in the village, but we manage. But I'll tell you a secret, they don't like us here precisely because we don't drink or fight." "No way." "Well, something like that. You sit here, I'll be quick. Remember where my house is?" Leonila smiled. "Of course." Nacho returned about 15 minutes later. During this time, Leonila was sitting on the old bench. She didn't think about anything, she just sat there. Nacho wasn't alone, a woman was going with him. Leonila smiled. "Prudencia, hello." "Oh, Leonila, I never expected to see you. Let me at least hug you." They embraced, and Leonila felt warmth in her chest. Maybe it wasn't all bad here. Perhaps she shouldn't have stayed away completely. There were good moments in life and good people. Take Prudencia, for instance. She lived just like Leonila and never left, yet she made a life for herself. She didn't drink herself away like the others, she lived. While Nacho cleared the way, Leonila and Prudencia chatted. "When Nacho told me you were coming, I didn't believe him. I thought he got it wrong. I never thought you'd want to come back. How are your parents, by the way? I haven't had anyone in a long time. You know my mother passed away. My father drinks every day, and now my grandmother has started drinking with him. Nacho and I live at my place. As for his father, he's still alive. He doesn't talk to me or Nacho, not even the grandkids, like we're strangers." Leonila looked at Prudencia in amazement. She had always been tough as nails. "And how many children do you have?" Prudencia laughed. Three boys. You can't imagine what a headache I could have when they are at home." "And what about you?" "I'm fine. I'm married and working. Everything is good." Prudencia looked at her attentively but didn't ask anything. "Hey, ladies, please, the path is cleared." Nacho playfully bowed and gestured towards the open door of the house. They went inside, and Leonila sighed. "There's nowhere to sit here." She understood that a single day wouldn't be enough to clean up this mess. She didn't know how long she would stay, but Prudencia didn't lose hope. "So, where can you find some bags around here?" "Probably in the pantry." Leonila caught her enthusiasm. She had already taken off her expensive coat, folded it, and put it in a bag. Prudencia peeked outside. "Nacho, when you're done, call the boys. They can help her, there's work for them too." Not even half an hour passed, and a lot of bags filled with various odds and ends dominated the room. At least 4 bags, if not more, were filled with empty bottles that had been lying here for years. Then, 3 boys appeared on the doorstep. The oldest one was about 10, and the youngest was 3 or 4. "Mom, you wanted to see us?" "Boys, we need to help Leonila carry all this garbage to the dump." "Okay, Mom." And that was it. No chit-chat, no arguments. They just picked up the trash and carried it outside, even the little one holding onto a bag. Nacho lit the stove, and the house immediately felt cozier. A couple of hours later, Leonila suggested, "Prudencia, let's take a break and go to the store. We can buy something to eat and some treats for your boys." "There's no need to spoil them," she said somewhat sternly, but there was so much love in her voice. "Well, don't spoil them, but I can treat them myself." They got dressed and went outside. The boys helped Nacho carry out the grass. "Nacho, we're going to the store." "Okay, that's fine." Leonila passed through the gate first. "The store isn't closed yet, is it?" "No, of course not. It was bought by the new farmer." "Have you heard about him?" "I have. The taxi driver told me." "Well, he bought it. Now, I guess they have goods, whether we see them or not. There are lots of summer residents. Let's go see the goods then." "Is Marina's mother working?" "Oh no, not for a long time. Maybe a year or 2 later, she met a newcomer and left with him. She didn't call or write to anyone, as they say. She must have loved our village a lot." "Is Marina still with her?" "You don't know anything at all. She just abandoned Marina here, that's all. And by that time, she was already seeing Hilario." "Do you remember him?" "Well, of course. How could I forget someone like him?" So, when Marina left, she and Hilario got together. In short, now they drink a lot and have many children. Marina's house got burned down, so they moved in at Hilario's place. Everything was more civilized there. Marina's mother passed away not long after that. Can you believe it, with all those kids of hers? And their father found someone in the city and left. What does it mean she has many children? Leonila didn't quite understand. It sounded like she was reproducing like a cat. Well, they have a child almost every year. They take children away from her and leave some with her. Ugh, talking about them is disgusting. Nowadays, they pay good benefits, so they keep having children, you know, to have something to drink. Although I suspect they have another source of income. No one knows for sure, but there are rumors that they make their children work for the farmer. They don't want to work themselves, they just want to drink. Maybe the gossip is false, but it's unclear how he manages everything alone. Prudencia, but that's a crime. Of course it is. The local police officer has tried to find out several times, but the children stay silent either out of fear or because they don't mind it. They approached the store. Leonila was amazed. Unbelievable. Everything is so new and shiny. You haven't been inside yet. They entered the store. Yes, everything was modern, but one thing remained unchanged. A group of old ladies was gathered here. It was a sort of gossip committee. Whenever someone entered the store, as soon as they left, the ladies would dissect them verbally. Leonila remembered such gatherings in the store from her childhood. Back then, nobody waited until she left. They immediately started to gasp and whine about her parents. As if on cue, the ladies fell silent and stared at Leonila. Apparently, no one recognized her. Leonila approached the counter. She felt something strange. In her childhood, she had a dream to come here when there was a crowd and buy the most expensive items to shut their mouths. "Miss, show me the cake. I'd like to see it." The unfamiliar, plump lady at the counter, without turning to her, responded. "It costs 800. And what?" Leonila couldn't figure out why she told her that. The saleswoman finally turned around, gave Leonila an assessing look, and immediately smiled. "It's a fresh cake. It was just delivered this morning. Will you take it?" "We'll take it." Prudentia nudged Leonila. "Don't lose your mind. It's expensive." Leonila didn't pay any attention to her. "I'd like some smoked sausage, a piece of that meat, and a kilogram of candies." "Yes, let's take those ones in the form of triangles." Leonila realized that she and Prudentia would hardly manage to carry all these items. There was a tense silence behind her, and Leonila smiled. "Do you have wine?" "Preferably French." The saleswoman hurried to the wine display, feverishly reading labels. Leonila pointed at one of the bottles. "Two of those, please." The saleswoman placed the front wine on the counter, looked at it with a melancholy expression, and announced the total amount. From the crowd of elderly women came a unanimous gasp. My God! The elderly ladies couldn't quite decide how to react to this kind of purchase, especially with items they considered extravagant. If she had bought rice, sugar, or flour, that would have made more sense to them. But this young lady bought luxury items and simply spent a fortune. As Leonila and Prudentia left, one of the grandmothers stepped forward. "Are you, by any chance, Leonila?" Leonila proudly grinned and replied, "That's right. I'm Leonila Santos. I wouldn't have recognized you, not in a million years." Leonila said nothing and went out into the street. For a while, she and Prudentia carried the bags in silence. Then Prudentia asked, "So, what was that all about? Where are you taking all this?" Leonila shrugged. "I fulfilled a childhood dream. Now we'll set the table for a reunion." Prudentia smiled. "You really are something. Spending all that money just to reminisce about childhood grievances." 3 hours later, they sat at the table in Leonila's home, surrounded by all their purchases. The boys, who saw them from afar, rushed to help carry the bags. And after seeing the cake, they got down to work diligently. "So, here's to our reunion." "To our reunion." They were sitting for a long time, and then Leonila said, "I feel quite awkward asking, but can I stay overnight at your place? I'm scared here in this house. It's supposed to be my family home, and I lived here for a long time, but I can't bring myself to stay here. I can't explain it, it's just that I can't." Leonila looked at Prudentia and Nacho with a guilty expression. "Of course. You could have come straight to our place." It was already dark outside, and a slight frost was in the air. Nacho insisted that Leonila should have taken all her belongings to their house. "Why don't you stay with us? What's the point of staying here alone? You can come here during the day, and that's it." Leonila gladly agreed. She had slightly overestimated her ability to spend the night in her own house. In the middle of the night, she was awakened by a commotion. "Leonila, can you hear that? Your house is on fire." She jumped out of bed and, together with everyone else, rushed to the house. The fire was already raging. Leonila managed to dash into the yard, where she saw something that left her in shock. Nacho immediately pulled her back onto the path. "Have you gone completely crazy? What are you trying to do? Let it burn to hell." The firefighters arrived when the house wasn't just burning but had burned down completely. They all returned to Prudentia and Nacho's house. The children had gone back to sleep, and they were sitting in the kitchen. Prudentia made coffee. Could it be a problem with electricity? It had been standing there for quite a while, and nothing happened. But as soon as Leonila arrived, it caught fire. Nacho thoughtfully tapped his fingers on the table. The house was burning from the outside. "I don't think it was an issue with the wiring." Prudentia gasped. "Are you suggesting that someone set it on fire?" Leonila raised her head. "When I ran into the yard, I saw that the front door was wedged shut." Nacho whistled. "All right, Leonila, this is getting interesting. Don't you want to tell us something?" It's not a coincidence that you arrived and the house suddenly caught fire, is it? I don't know, Nacho. But now I'm certain that I'm on the right track. The right track? I'll have to tell you everything. Just please, don't tell anyone anything until I find out for myself. When Leonila finished her story, Nacho remained silent for a long time. Then he said, "It seems to me that our farmer is involved in this." "Come on, Prudencia. You really think he went all the way to the city to take Leonila's child? And besides, why would he want such a small child?" "That's true, but all of this can't be a mere coincidence." Leonila wandered through the village, trying to figure out what to do. Now she was absolutely certain that she wouldn't leave until she found out something. "Leonila, is that you?" She turned around. Marina was standing in front of her. She appeared to be severely hungover, probably because of last night's binge that was notorious in the area. "Hello, Marina." Something was bothering Leonila, but she didn't quite understand what it was yet. "I heard that your house burned down." "Yes, it burned down last night. You've probably interfered with someone around here. You should leave before anything else happens." "What could possibly happen?" "The wiring was old, that's why it caught fire." "Well, anything is possible. How's life? How's your husband, your daughter?" Leonila didn't want to discuss her family with this unsavory character or with Marina in general. "Everything's fine. I need to go." "Wait. How about you throw in something for old time's sake?" Leonila quickly took some bills out of her wallet, handed them to Marina, and hurried off in the direction of Prudencia and Nacho's house. Now, she was even more concerned about something else. But what? She arrived and silently sat down on the couch. Prudencia was looking at her. "Leonila, what happened?" "I met Marina." "What's she?" "Well, she's a mess." "Are you so upset because of that?" "Not because of that." "Then why?" "I don't know, Prudencia, I don't understand. There's some kind of thread or something, but I don't understand what." And then Leonila jumped up. "How does Marina know that I have a husband and a daughter?" Nobody in the village knew that I had a daughter, not a son or two, but specifically a daughter. Prudencia sat down. "That is indeed very strange. Wait, in which year did your daughter disappear?" "She went off somewhere, then returned with a tablet. Here, we gave it to the eldest one for his birthday. He didn't have one when all the others did." Prudencia was looking for something frantically. "Here it is." Marina wasn't drinking like this back then. She was drinking, but not this bad. She even had money. Check out her social media. She hasn't logged in for about 3 years, but all the old photos are still there. Here's the right year. Look, they still had a car back then. "Stop!" Leonila shouted so loudly that Prudencia was startled. She pointed at a photograph. "Look, this is the park. This is the festival where Rafaela went missing. My God! Is this possible? Is Rafaela with them?" Prudencia contemplated. "Unlikely. Even in the village, they can distinguish between children and pregnancy. Unless..." "What?" "I'm thinking about that farmer." Leonila jumped up. "I'm going there." "Stop, you fool. You can't go alone. You understand that they could take you down in 5 minutes, just like Nacho says, especially since you saw everything yourself last night. But maybe Rafaela is there. You won't be able to help her, understand? We need to come up with something." Leonila grabbed her phone and rushed out onto the street. "Hello, Giorgio, I really need your help." She talked for about 15 minutes and then returned. "They'll be here in about 5 to 6 hours. Sit and wait." 3 hours later, Prudencia went somewhere, and Leonila hurried out of the house, heading towards Hilario's home. Both the husband and wife were at home. "Oh, what a surprise! Come in, Leonila, have a seat." Leonila noticed the very poor and dirty condition of the house. The children were huddled together on the couch. "What, don't you have anything to drink for us?" "I didn't think about it." "I'll give you the money, would you go get some?" Hilario readily got up. Marina looked at her somewhat malevolently. Leonila took out the money and added, "Take also this money and get some treats for the kids." Hilario left, and Marina sat across from her. "You think you're going to snoop around for something?" "What are you talking about, Marina? Don't act like a fool. You've done all this in vain. Nothing will come of it. You're going to perish here. You should have gone back home. Although now nobody will let you leave this place. And soon you'll forget what home even means." Leonila looked her in the eyes. "Where's my daughter?" Marina laughed. "You can look for her." Hilario and another man entered the house. The man had unpleasant, small, evil eyes. Leonila's heart sank. Judging by his clothes and the way he carried himself, he appeared to be the owner here. She approached him. I know my daughter is with you." The man swung his hand, and Leonila fell to the ground. She lost consciousness immediately. The children in the room had disappeared, and it was completely silent. Marina jumped up and spat on the unconscious Leonila. "Got it? Now things will be as you deserve." Sergio sneered and said, "Take her into the car. Do you even understand how you've just set me up?" "Why, Sergio? What does it have to do with us? So many years have passed." "Enough, be quiet. And tell the kids that there is no one here. Understood?" "Understood, Sergio." They put Leonila in the trunk of a large SUV, and the car drove out of the yard. Leonila woke up in some sort of cage as someone was stroking her face. She opened her eyes. Two girls and a boy, probably around 10 to 12 years old but looking much younger due to their extreme thinness, were crouched in front of her. "Does it hurt?" The girl looked at her sympathetically. "A little. Don't worry, it only hurts at first. You get used to it." Leonila sat up. It was almost dark in the basement. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" "We live here." "Live? Can you actually live here?" "No one asks us that. We live and work." The boy pointed at his neck, where there was some kind of collar. "See? If something goes wrong, it electrocutes us. My goodness, we need to escape from here." "You can't escape from here. Do you think we haven't tried? Those who try to escape get badly beaten, and then they don't feed us. And if we don't eat, we can't work, and they beat us again." Leonila could feel the hair on her head shifting. "How long have you been here?" "Different periods, but overall, a long time. We don't have calendars here. Rafaela tried to escape 5 times, and now she's lying there. She'll probably die. We've had people die here before." "Rafaela? Where? Where is she?" The boy pointed to the corner. Leonila rushed over. The girl was lying on her side, pulling her knees close to herself. Everything was blurry for Leonila. It was her daughter. "Rafaela, my dear, my baby girl." She carefully pushed aside the hair covering her injured forehead. "So, you're reunited? That's good. Your girl is so stubborn. We've been teaching her how to behave well. If she dies, you'll work for her." Sergio laughed. "You will pay for it. You will pay for everything. I'm so afraid, my heart even skipped a beat. No one will ever find you here, not even with dogs. I've thought it through. It's been a while since I had adult help around here, ever since my wife died in this basement. But maybe you can be of use, right? You're young and attractive." And he laughed again. "Marina has been quite helpful to me. First, your daughter. She was so small back then, but I taught her how to work. And now it's your turn. Do you know why she hates you so much? Leonila silently stared at him. At that moment, Sergio's radio crackled, and Leonila heard the word guests. He quickly left the room. Leonila lowered herself to the floor, gently placing Rafaela's head in her lap. My daughter, Rafaela, everything will be fine. Dad will find us. The girl opened her eyes. At first, her gaze was unfocused, but then she focused on Leonila's face. Mommy, I knew you'd find me. Rafaela closed her eyes. Sweetheart, please, not now. Do you hear me? Tears streamed down Leonila's face. She could see Rafaela's condition, and she knew time was running out, counting down not by days, but by hours. The other children gathered around. Leonila cradled Rafaela and whispered through her tears. Hang in there, my little baby. Just a little while longer. They will save us, and everything will be fine. The youngest girl suddenly burst into tears. I want to be with my mom too. Leonila reached out her hand. We will find your mom, I promise you. Upstairs, they heard a commotion. Leonila listened closely, and the boy said, He hit your husband. Leonila flinched and said, Don't speak like that, can't you hear? You shouldn't talk that way. 20 more minutes passed, and then the door to the cellar burst open into pieces. They all screamed. In the doorway, Giorgio appeared. Is everyone okay? There was no other way. Leonila, how are you? Daughter. I found my daughter. He walked up to Rafaela, examined her, and cursed. What a monster. Let me carry her out. The ambulance should have arrived by now. They're going to your husband first. Can't stand waiting. Is this your family? Silvio? What happened to him? Nothing too bad. He'll recover soon. Giorgio carefully picked up Rafaela and headed towards the light. Leonila followed him. At the exit, she paused and said, Well, what are you waiting for? The children timidly left the cellar and walked behind Leonila. Right after they exited the underground chamber, Silvio was sitting there. A doctor was tending to his leg. Leonila. Rafaela? He almost pushed the doctor aside. It's Rafaela. What did he do to you? They were speeding down the highway towards the regional city. The doctor immediately said the journey would be crucial as there was no help available in their area. Leonila knew that Giorgio had contacted someone, and an ambulance was racing to meet them. They met halfway on the road, and they transferred Rafaela to the ambulance. Leonila sat beside her after kissing Silvio. Everything will be fine. Silvio's pain was evident. He seemed to have completely forgotten about his injured leg, which was bleeding. Throughout the journey, he couldn't take his eyes off his daughter. Leonila gestured to him and climbed into the car. She watched as Silvio was helped into the ambulance by the doctors. She took Rafaela's hands. Her daughter still hadn't regained consciousness. The car raced forward, its siren wailing, while Leonila cried and prayed. Oh Lord, you seem to despise us so much. You've done so much harm to us, please stop. She's an innocent child, don't harm her or take her away. Leonila was sitting in the hospital corridor. The surgery had been going on for 4 hours. Near the end of the 4th hour, Giorgio arrived and sat beside her. How is she? I don't know yet, she's in surgery. That monster beat her so badly. Leonila choked back tears. I don't know what's happening in there. The doctor said it's very serious. The man sat down next to her. Leonila, it's been nearly 7 years. You understand that everything will be fine. There's no other option. I understand. I hope so. That's right. I was there when they took Marina and Hilario. She was screaming so much. It turns out she saw you by accident. By that time, they had already brought 2 little kids to that scum. They only took kids who were 7 to 8 years old, not as young as your little girl. But when she saw you, she got furious. She was screaming that you should have been in their place, that you should have gotten drunk in the village, and that you were happy and well dressed. So she decided to restore justice that way. For 2 years, Rafaela lived with them, sometimes in the basement, sometimes in the pantry. Children crying in this house was a common occurrence, so none of the neighbors paid attention to the screams. Then she gave her to them. What about the other kids? Their parents are already being searched for. It will be necessary to determine who the parents of those who died are. But the mother of the smallest girl has already been found. You won't believe it, but she's almost your neighbor, living right next door to you. Giorgio, what is this? How is it possible? I thought this only happens in movies. He smiled sadly. Well, movies get their plots from real life, didn't you know that? Giorgio didn't explain how the meeting between the little girl and her mother happened. She was perhaps the most terrified. It seemed that the children huddled, squinted in the sunlight, and worked only at night. When everyone arrived at the police station, one of the officers said, I've seen this girl somewhere, in some cases. He rushed out and returned 10 minutes later with a photograph. Look, I told you, take a look. The girl in the photo was staring back, but there she was, about 3 years old, no more. The police officer was already dialing a number. Please, you need to come to the station urgently. The mother literally stormed into the station. She was wide-eyed and without a hat. What happened? Do you have any news? And then she saw the children. Her gaze stopped on the little girl, who was also staring at her. A second later, the girl jumped up with a cry. Mom! The woman managed to hug her and whispered, Laura! And then she simply lost consciousness. While they were looking for smelling salts and reviving her, the little girl didn't let go of her mother's hand. The moment the woman woke up, she clutched her daughter to her. They sat on the floor until they were lifted up and placed on chairs. Giorgio saw how this whole situation affected the men, who had put away numerous criminals, and they turned away, wiping away their tears. Even he, a man who had been in some very grim places, lost his wife and nearly lost his daughter. He was also wiping his eyes. The police officers kept working to find out who the parents of the other children were. It appeared that all the children were from the same town. The door opened. Leonila jumped to her feet. Are you the mother? Yes. I never show my emotions, but right now I'm in shock. I'm horrified. This child has 7 fractures, and they've healed on their own. We did everything we could. Now we wait. She was brought in too late, her body is exhausted. But there is one, and only one, positive thing: this girl really wants to live. You can feel it, it gives us hope. Leonila was sitting by Rafaela's bedside. It was the second day. The doctor had resisted but finally let Leonila see her daughter after hearing the story from someone. The door opened quietly. Leonila. She turned around. Silvio was standing in the doorway, leaning on a crutch. I ran away to see you. He hobbled in and sat down next to Leonila. How is she? No changes. That's all right. What's important is that she's not worse. Silvio took his daughter's hand. Our little baby, we're with you, we'll never let you go again. Something had changed, they both felt it. Rafaela moved her fingers, and then more of them. Leonila rushed out to the hallway. Doctor, quickly. 2 months passed. Come in, sweetheart. We haven't changed anything in your room, nothing at all. But if you want, we can change everything. Rafaela gazed at everything with huge eyes. I remember this painting and this blanket. But where? Silvio darted out of the room and returned with a soft toy. Here. Are you looking for this one? Rafaela took a toy. Marcelo, right? Marcelo? Exactly. It's just that while you were away, Mom slept with him. Rafaela walked slowly and sat on the couch. Am I home? Leonila sat next to her. You're home, dear. If only you knew how we looked for you and how we longed for you. Will no one hit me anymore? No one, never. You will only be loved. Silvio suddenly smiled. Rafaela, I have a request for you. The girl looked at him in surprise. What is it? Yes. The thing is, while we were looking for you, Mom and I had disagreements. We even got divorced. I really want our mom to become my wife, but I'm afraid she'll refuse. Leonila laughed. Hey, I'm right here. But Silvio paid no attention to her. Rafaela smiled. Mommy, will you marry Dad? Of course, I will. Leonila hugged them both and suddenly burst into tears. Oh my God, I thought this moment would never come. The wedding was full of unusual guests. Giorgio took care of the organization. And no objections. It will be my wedding gift. The bride's friends, teenage girls, pretty but all very slim, stood next to each other. Each had their mother standing nearby like a vulture. Nora and Prudential were not far away, discussing something animatedly while their husbands smiled indulgently. The recording was about to start when the groom's phone rang in his pocket. Just a minute, please. He talked to someone and came back. The trial had just ended. This scoundrel got a life sentence. Everyone else got no less than 10 years. Everyone in the courtroom applauded. Rafaela had to learn everything again and learn how to live again. She didn't know how to use a fork anymore. She forgot all the letters they had once learned. She couldn't go to school for obvious reasons, so there were always people at home. One tutor came and another left. In a year, they managed to cover the curriculum of 3 years of studying. Silvio exclaimed, "You did a great job. Although I never doubted you." Rafaela faintly smiled. "Do you really think I can do it?" "Think?" "We are absolutely certain of it. And remember, you are the best, the most loved one, always and in everything."
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.